Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.
Hello, I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. Our guests today are Dr. David Lay, Executive Director of New Mexico Solutions. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And Senator Bill O'Neill, Democrat from District 13, Bernalillo. And we are here today. I'm so grateful you're here. We're going to have an update on the New Mexico behavioral health situation. And I'd like each one of you to tell me a little about your background and what you bring to this discussion. Then we're going to talk about what's happening right now. I guess because you're a government official, we'll let you go first.
Well, thank you.
Happy to defer.
Okay, well, thank you, Lorene. It's great to be back here. I love your show. It's always an honor to be on. And you do such important work. So just let the minutes reflect. And on this issue, you've been just tenacious following it. And those of us that care about behavioral health in New Mexico really appreciate the work that you've been doing and continue to do. I'm Bill O'Neill. I represent the beautiful North Valley of Albuquerque, District 13. I'm starting my 5th year in the Senate, or actually I'll be going on my 6th year. And before that, I was in the House for 4 years. I've been on the Legislative Health and Human Services Committee now since I was elected to the House. And currently, I'm honored to be the chair of the Behavioral Health Subcommittee that met just this last Friday down in Las Cruces. And we were fortunate to have Dr. Lay present, along with others, to give us a snapshot of the state of behavioral health in our state.
Well, that's a good intro to you, Dr. Lay. Tell us a little about your background and what you bring to the issue of behavioral health in New Mexico.
Sure. I'm a clinical psychologist. I got my master's and PhD at UNM. I've been working in New Mexico, roughly since 95 or 96 in various iterations. I've worked with managed care, worked at the state hospital. Since about 2004, I've been running a community mental health center in Albuquerque that has grown tremendously. And
tremendously. Didn't you go from 100 patients maybe in 2004 to over 2,000 now? I mean, that's growth.
We really did. And all of that growth was in community-based services. We really, as an agency, we're a nonprofit, we're really committed to providing services in the community that patients need and can benefit. Our goal as an agency is really to make it so that our patients don't need us, so that they can recover from the issues that are going on and they can walk away and have successful and healthy lives without having to come to a therapist or a doctor. That's our goal.
Let's do a little foundation, because a lot of people don't know what we're talking about when we say behavioral health. What did it used to be known as, and what is it now, either of you?
Well, I'm really glad you said that. When we talked about behavioral health, we used to be talking about, mental health issues. And we used to just be talking typically about kind of those folks that would end up in the state hospital or had kind of chronic mental health issues. We've expanded the term now and are talking more about behavioral health, really to acknowledge that there are a large diversity of kinds of issues that end up in this. And it includes child issues, trauma issues, people who've experienced trauma or child or sexual abuse. But it also includes things like substance abuse, treatment and recovery. It has become a very large umbrella, and so we are talking more about the health issues that impact people's happiness, their lives, their relationships. And what's really interesting, and I've been doing this long enough that I've kind of seen, we didn't used to talk about these issues as much as we do now. And now you can't turn on the news without hearing about behavioral health. And unfortunately, a lot of that is the result of the fragility and the fragmentation of the behavioral health treatment system across our country. Years ago, under Reagan, actually, they closed state hospitals and they changed the funding system and the structure of services around the country. And as a result, lots and lots of people who were getting good, stable treatment ended up homeless and ended up in very fragmented, disrupted services. And unfortunately, we are still experiencing the downstream ripples of that, 40 years later. And I think that's really an important message, because I think the ripples of the events in 2013 are going to continue to affect New Mexico behavioral health services probably for at least another decade or two in similar kinds of ways.
Well, Bill, you want to take what happened in 2013?
Yes, 2000.
Because it's our immediate history. Yes, the Ronald Reagan's, it affected the whole nation.
Sure.
But we just got like turbo demolition of our behavioral health system in 2013. Just give us a history. If
In the summer of 2013, Governor Martinez and HSD, under the leadership of Sidoni Squires, basically kicked out, accused 14 New Mexico behavioral health providers of fraud in a very highly publicized, charged way. These providers had no ability to answer the charges. Their contracts were basically terminated, and then 5 Arizona companies came into New Mexico without any bidding or anything and took over the behavioral health system of our state. Now, many of us, and including my Republican colleagues, by the way, were appalled at how this transpired. I mean, due process is a basic American right. And so the fact that these agencies that were doing good work, one in particular in my district, Hogatis, who I used to work with when I was executive director of the Juvenile Parole Board, did wonderful work with troubled juveniles that were in CYFD's custody. Anyway, these folks were just put out of business, essentially. And it was outrageous. It was something that politically was quite the issue. And I know I always thought it would be the issue in the governor's reelection bid. And it wasn't. I mean, there was some kind of disconnect. I don't think the Democratic candidate was the right champion for that. So regardless, it will be her legacy. It will be, because a lot of these agencies have lawyers. I mean, my goodness, we're going to end up paying all kinds of money to these providers that were just basically run out of Dodge. And so it's quite upsetting to relive it. On the other hand, what we want to do now is to make sure it doesn't happen again. So that's kind of where we are politically.
One of the significant aspects to this that I think oftentimes doesn't get some attention is the role of the company Optum Health New Mexico, who, under Bill Richardson back in 2004, roughly, the state decided to carve out behavioral health services from Medicaid and to set them up differently and to manage them differently. And they brought in a single entity. At first it was Value Options, and then 4 or 5 years later they brought in Optum Health New Mexico to manage this. And ultimately, this is the state trying to put responsibility for managing this complicated system onto this single entity so the state doesn't have to kind of do as much. But unfortunately, that relies on these for-profit managed care commercial companies to come in and oversee an incredibly complex, nuanced New Mexico-specific system. And one of the things that happened in 2012, prior to the 2013 audit, Optum Health New Mexico officials and executives went to the state and they said, and these are in public reports, they said, we think we've identified, fraud, waste, and abuse in these agencies. And it was that really prompted this whole audit. Now, interestingly, Optum Health New Mexico system executives also went to the state, and they already had a list of those Arizona providers back in 2012 that they thought should be brought in. So all of that selection had been done in advance. Now, providers like myself have now looked at some of those reports and documents and said, now, wait a minute. The things that Optum Health was calling fraud and abuse are okay. Things like, for instance, billing 2 services in one day. Many behavioral health providers do that. We have a family come in and we provide family therapy and individual therapy and maybe medication management all on the same day because it's tough for people to get in. Optum Health, not understanding the rules of our system, looked at that and said it was fraud. The big problem is that there was nobody who was really an expert on our system and how these things work that ever looked at that and said, now wait a minute, this isn't fraud. At this point, our system is so complicated. It has so many workarounds. It has so many, chewing gum and baling wire and duct tape fixes that it is really only providers who work in the system and are billing for services that understand kind of how all these workarounds work. And now we are unfortunately faced with the fact that nobody in managed care and nobody in the state really understand how this system works as well as we do. But unfortunately, things like this keep happening because the state and the governor, unfortunately, in that case, was going around and saying behavioral health providers were crooks and that we were greedy and untrustworthy. Most behavioral health providers are nonprofit folks who are just trying to provide services to people in desperate need, and to get called crooks, and it was just appalling.
And the most grievous thing was that they were never allowed to present their side or to defend themselves. Now, Senator Papin from Las Cruces, talk to me about her due process bill that passed unanimously in both houses.
67-0 in the House. Actually, it wasn't unanimous in the Senate, but just was overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it was Senate Bill 217. This is the last session where this made it through. Again, strong bipartisan support because, again, many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were appalled at how this went down. So, this bill passed, and it was pocket vetoed by the governor. Now, I want to talk about moving on because we all want to move on. Your community wants to move on. The Senate does, the House. But the signal from HSD, and again, these are new people, and I mentioned to you off air, the behavioral health head is Dr. Lindstrom. I like him. He came to my, poetry reading, which we can get to later. But we want to move on. But why does HSD aggressively oppose this bill? I mean, I can understand maybe the governor just because she just does what she does, but they aggressively oppose this due process bill. And so the question is, okay, we all want to move on, but why are you depriving future providers of this basic right of due process? And I think it sent the wrong message, so it's hard for us to believe that they're truly, when they say, yes, let's move on, and yes, we're delivering services better than ever, which is a whole other issue, it's a problem for us. I mean, we want to move on from this 2013 catastrophe, but it's important that we don't forget it.
And also, why is HSD still, prosecuting, I might even say persecuting this case against those providers when, all the evidence to date now indicates that there was no fraud and that the millions of dollars that was alleged to have been fraud or inappropriate billing was not. I mean, one provider, down in Las Cruces, a provider who'd been there for decades, that the governor, said, well, he's flying around in a private jet. That provider was alleged to have overbilled for $2 million, and it turned out to be, less than $400.
Yeah, and that is just shameful, actually.
And HSD is still after those providers. They're still fighting it. And given the wrong that has been done, I think the next governor, I think the next HSD administration, they're going to have to rectify this.
Let's clarify that HSD is the Human Services Department. And let me also clarify that we're speaking today with Dr. David Lay and Senator Bill O'Neill about this really crucial issue. I'm so happy we can look at this. I need to step back a little bit because as a result of the 2013 crisis, many companies were put out of business, lost all their investment. But the patients, this is what I found the most grievous. You get teenage moms, drug addicts, you get the most vulnerable people in our society. Maybe they've worked for years to finally find a therapist they can relate to. Maybe they're finally on the road, and suddenly, not only is their therapist gone, the whole agency is gone. And there were thousands of patients without any care, the most vulnerable part of our population.
And it keeps happening because, the 3 out of the 5 Arizona agencies that came in have left. Across the state, agency after agency, is shutting down, closing their doors, deciding that this system is just too complicated, it's too risky. And so many people are going without services that they desperately need. And we haven't fixed that yet. Now, the Health and Human Services, the federal office, the Office of the Inspector General, is coming into New Mexico this fall right now and doing an investigation as to whether or not, New Mexico Medicaid has been following the law in terms of ensuring access to behavioral health services. And unfortunately, providers like myself, we're aware that we all desperately want to provide services, but the state system makes it really, really hard. And what we really hope, and Dr. Lindstrom, has been a good partner with us in this, really in trying to identify those barriers that make it more difficult for us to provide services easily and freely. And one of those is this fear that if we do it a little bit wrong, or if we step outside the box a little bit because this patient really needs it, that we're going to get audited and shut down. And I think that's why Senator Papen's bill and as Senator O'Neill is talking, that's the kind of protection we need from our legislators so that we can do this work.
And it's so hard to quantify the disruption of services. You're left with anecdotes, and anecdotes only go so far, and then you have HSDs maintaining, oh, no, everything's fine. The governor at that time said there would be no disruption of services. But all I know is I drive by Hogadas several times a week. It's in the middle of my district, and it is shuttered, weeds pulling up through the sidewalk. And to me, it's just a symbolic of how wrong this was. And who knows what happened to those clients, and many of whom I know you worked with in the juvenile system. And so we just have to, as legislators, take HSD's word, oh yes, things are fine. We're rather skeptical for understandable reasons.
Well, let's look at that, because the administration is saying, oh, we're taking care of more behavioral clients than we ever have. But is that compared to what? After they pulled out the rug from everyone and there was, hardly anyone was getting services. Right. Now they're maybe back to half of what they were before.
Well, this, providers have been, questioning that data for a long time, because it is it's not comparing apples and apples. It's apples and grapefruit maybe. We're comparing services under Medicaid Centennial Care, which includes the Medicaid expansion and a much larger population. It also is including a lot of services that are rendered in primary care offices that are traditional medical services. For instance, a primary care doctor writing a prescription for Prozac or an antidepressant is now getting counted in some cases as a behavioral health service when it wasn't before, because under the carve-out, under Optum and Value Options, those weren't really showing up in that way. So unfortunately, providers across the state, we are experiencing an incredible brain drain with people leaving the state and going to other states with better economies and state agencies that aren't treating them like crooks. We're also having difficulty recruiting and training new staff to work in behavioral health because it is such a complicated, challenging environment. And then our rates and our funding for services are minimal. We're also seeing this progression of services away from behavioral health providers and into medical providers, which is good because it really is important that we treat medical and behavioral health services together. But unfortunately, that leads to some significant changes. It changes the environment the patients are coming in to get treatment. It also changes the services that a provider is willing to render. And unfortunately, all of these changes are just kind of happening. What we really need is somebody and a system and legislators who are looking and saying, look, we need to figure out what's right for our community and make better decisions in these issues.
Well, Senator, I'd like an update, because just last week, just a few days ago, the Behavioral Health Subcommittee, which you chair, had a very important meeting in Las Cruces, right? And some, to me, shocking details came out about some of the providers down there. Could you explain this?
Yes, well, it was midway through the morning, and then we were informed by the agency that took over for La Frontera, which was an Arizona company that took over the behavioral health services in Las Cruces, informed us that when they took over this caseload, that only 5% of their clients were compliant to Medicaid standards, meaning that there was all this brouhaha over Albuquerque, New Mexico agencies not
Towing the
towing the line,
Yeah.
and then in this case, not only did they leave town, but they were obviously not doing their job, and we were stunned because we wanted to know, well, why weren't they held to the same standards?
Exactly. That's 95% non-compliance. That is, it's stunning. It's stunning to me. And so they came here. They said, we can't make enough money. We're going to go back to Arizona. And they leave this ruin of like
So,
only 5%.
As
that we're
legislators,
helped.
we have a lot of questions, and we're following up aggressively on this new information.
Yeah. I mean,
And
that's,
we're really cheering you on. Now, I think, for us, that one of the messages in that is that, it's not easy to come into the New Mexico behavioral health system. This really is complicated business, and you can't do this work without a deep commitment to New Mexico and a deep understanding of the system that we have. The state and Optum thought that they could bring these providers in from another state and just put them in and open up shop. Turns out it's a little more complicated than that.
well, also the Lou Wallace quote that things that work elsewhere don't really work in New Mexico.
Yeah.
So they come in with a little Arizona, sense of order, and that's not what they found here.
No.
Yeah. Please keep us posted. It's so important that we come. How can we, yes, we can't forget the wrongs that were done, and I think someone's feet are ultimately going to have to be held to the fire, even for those companies that were put out of business through these false fraud accusations. Are they going to ultimately then receive their Medicaid payments that were withheld from them?
In many cases, they are. Many of the agencies have been receiving large portions of the Medicaid receivables that have been held by the state. And that's only fair. That's money that they had earned by providing services legally to people who needed it. The bigger question, I think, is, the damages, because people's reputations were destroyed. Hogadas is a nonprofit that had been in the Albuquerque area for 40 years. And, this just took that away. That's a travesty.
Moving forward, I can say that we want to work in a bipartisan way. I love the subcommittee. We have passionate Republican members who really care about these issues, and so the challenge is to move ahead, but of course not to forget what happened, and to really force the issue with some just more candor or less defensiveness from HSD. It would be nice to truly move on and really deliver these vital services to the New Mexico kids and adults that really need it.
And something like Senator Papen's bill demanding that people who are falsely accused would have their constitutional right, which is already granted them but wasn't followed, of due process to be able to defend themselves. That's going to have to come back. And, when
Senator Papen, she's hardly ready to give up on that. She'll bring it back next session, hopefully, and we can work together and get that passed.
Yeah.
Or it might take a while. We'll see.
Yeah.
And one of the things, that providers, I think, have really experienced out of this, as tragic and difficult as this has all been, has been, a really incredible alliance with the legislatures. The bipartisan support that we've gotten has been tremendous. And if anything, this has developed even better partnerships that I hope in the future will help let us craft a system of services that are efficient, effective, fair, and community-based, because that's what we all believe in. And the good side of this whole tragedy might be that it gives us the opportunity to do things even better in the future.
Well, I want to switch gears pretty dramatically because, among other things, as a fierce lawmaker fighting for things like the Independent Redistricting Commission, and one of your bills a few sessions ago was for a poet laureate, and you yourself are a poet, Senator O'Neill.
Oh, thank you.
So I have been reading this. I just want to show. It's called "The Freedom of the Ignored" by Bill O'Neill, Senator O'Neill. And since I know, I'm such a fan of politics, I know a lot of the situations you were writing about and a lot of the people that you were writing about. It refreshes my spirit to look at my beloved La Politica through the eyes of a poet. So thank you. When did you start writing these?
Well, it was after that driver's license session in 2011, and I just needed to process some of the feelings that I had. As you know, I was targeted in my Republican swing seat. I was called the sagebrush lizard because I was doomed. Everybody was coming up to me on both sides saying, "You are doomed. You know, you voted against Martinez's driver's license bill. Enjoy your freedom when you're out of here." But fast forward, these poems go back to that time and up to current times, making that transition from the House to the Senate. If nothing else, I hope that this book dispels stereotypes about politicians. It's already getting attention because apparently it's unusual for a politician to write poetry. And so, if nothing else, I think a reader gets a sense that we're like everyday people, and we just have extremely mundane issues as well as personality conflicts. And I just think, if nothing else, I kind of always react against that politician stereotype, the cigar smoking lobbyist,
backroom deals.
As a therapist, I just want to say, and I'm sorry, I'll be a therapist for a minute. I love that this was your way to cope with that stress and anxiety. I mean, I work with patients for years to get them to that point, and you did it yourself. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. So, I mean, a lot of it is kind of a journaling instinct, but because I'm can write poetry, and I just make that transition, and it seems to be interesting to people. It is available on Amazon and in local bookstores,
independent bookstores,
independent bookstores, Collected Works and Bookworks in Albuquerque. So
yes. Well, I want to thank you both very much. This is such an important topic, and thank you for giving us the latest update. And then so we've combined the policy perspective and the provider perspective, and it is ongoing. So as we move forward, we'll try to keep everyone posted. Our guests today are Dr. David Lay, Executive Director of New Mexico Solutions. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for continuing to keep attention on this issue. We on behalf of our patients, this is really important to us. Thank you.
Yeah. And our other guest is Senator Bill O'Neill, Senator/poet. Thank you. You've been fighting this fight for a really long time. I'm really proud of you. Thank you for all of your work.
Well, thank you, Lorraine.
Yeah. And I'd like to thank you, our audience, for being with us today on Report from Santa Fe. We'll see you next week.
Past archival programs of Report from Santa Fe are available at the website reportfromsantafe.com. If you have questions or comments, please email info@reportfromsantafe.com. Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.